This is The Future Of, where experts share their vision of the future and how their work is helping shape it for the better.
I'm David Carston. Small and sturdy and covered in quills, the short-beaked echidna is one of Australia's most recognisable and iconic animals. Combining both reptilian and mammalian traits, the echidna belongs to a rare group of mammals known as monotremes, famous for laying eggs instead of birthing live young. In this episode, I was joined by Dr. Christine Cooper from Curtin School of Molecular and Life Sciences. We unpacked her rare recordings of echidna communication, their impact on scientific debate, and discussed whether echidnas can adapt to climate change by blowing bubbles. Now, if you'd like to find out more about this research, you can visit the links provided in the show notes. So, Dr. Cooper, tell me, this fascination with echidnas, did it begin after your PhD, or was this something that came with you through childhood that you just had to pursue?
No, I worked on numbats for my PhD research, and they are a termitivorous marsupial, so they only eat termites. And their study site is where I also work on echidnas now. And so when I was working on the numbats, I noticed that there were a lot of echidnas around. And because they also feed on ants and termites, they were the obvious transition to move on to. So it just sort of came from being out in the field and seeing them around and being interested in animals that have dietary specialisations, and that led to working with the other termitivorous mammal.
They are such an object of fascination in the mainstream because for most of us, they almost defy categorisation. Can you help us there? Well, what is a monotreme?
So monotremes are a group of mammals that lay eggs. So that's really the really amazing defining character. So it's really unusual for mammals to lay eggs. Most mammals give birth to live young. But monotremes, so platypus and echidnas, lay eggs. And they have some other unusual anatomical features. So some of their skeletal features are partly reptilian. They have a different physiology. So they have very low body temperatures, low metabolic rates as well.
It's almost a bit Frankensteinish, really, isn't it, the echidna? It seems to be a combination of so many different characteristics. I mean, how have you got to know the echidna over all of these years, and how do you define it now that you've spent so much time with this amazing mammal?
For me, I tend to take them for granted a little bit because I spend so much time with them and I see them so much that they're normal. And I guess that's one of the things of working in Australia is the monotremes and the marsupials, which are just so special. We tend to take for granted because they're our day-to-day study species. They're the animals that we see around. So we do tend to take these really special mammals much for granted.
You mentioned you completed your PhD on numbats and that you encountered echidnas in the same sort of area. Where is that location exactly? Where is your sample study of both numbats and echidnas?
So a lot of my research is at Dryandra Woodland, which is now a national park, and it's near Narrogin, so about 170 kilometres southwest of Perth, or southeast of Perth.
And how would you describe the populations there? How does the social structure actually work for your average echidna?
So echidnas are theoretically solitary. They're supposed to be on their own, but we do find that they actually are a lot more social than what you would expect. So they do forage by themselves, but when they retreat to logs or caves or burrows, they do tend to be together. And we had some animals here in the lab in captivity, and we found that they would tend to cluster together. So we would give them lots of different places that they could hide and rest, and they would tend to all try and cram into the same place. And it wasn't always the one place. It wasn't like they just had a preferred place they wanted to be. It would be a different place, but if one was there, they wanted to be together. So we think they're a lot more social than what they're supposed to be.
So what is the life cycle like for an echidna? How old
they're very long-lived, so they can live up to 40 years.
And for the females, are there many opportunities to lay a new litter?
So they will have one young at a time, and they'll have that young maybe every 2 years. So they do the live slow, live long strategy of mammals.
Right until they're 40. Are they productive?
I don't know how long they will actually reproduce for. So it's particularly in the wild, it's difficult to know because they're very hard to age. They don't have teeth. So we can't easily age animals. So we only really know the age of animals that have been held in captivity. So for wild animals, you can either tell that they're a juvenile and they're small or they're an adult. But once they're an adult, they're really difficult to age. So we don't know how old most of our research animals are.
So in the wild, what is their foraging range? How far do they range in that Dryandra National Park?
So some of them will move from a couple of 100 metres to a couple of kilometres. So the males tend to move a lot further, particularly in breeding season when they're looking for females. So they will have the bigger ranges. But generally a few 100 metres.
Are they quite territorial?
They have home ranges but not territory. So they don't defend an area, but they definitely have home ranges that they send to stay inside. But they don't defend that from others. They overlap. So different individuals will have overlapping home ranges.
Now, you've studied some very specific characteristics of these amazing animals. Can you define what it is that you've been looking at? I guess most recently. I mean, let's start with the cooling apparatus or behaviours that they're displaying that you've actually, can I say, discovered?
So one of the issues with echidnas, it's always been believed that they're really sensitive to high temperatures. So they have low body temperatures, which means they don't have a lot of scope for becoming hot. So they've always been thought that if they get to high ambient temperatures, they just can't cope and they have pretty low lethal temperatures. But my PhD student was doing some research in the lab and we had echidnas in a metabolic chamber exposed to different ambient temperatures. And when temperatures got warmer, she noticed that they tended to blow bubbles from their nose. And so we thought, maybe this is a cooling mechanism because they have a big blood sinus on the tip of their snout. And we thought that perhaps when they blow these mucus bubbles, the mucus bursts over the sinus, wets it, and then as it evaporates, it would cool the blood. So we sort of thought about this for a long time, and this was her observation. And then several years later, we were in the field and we had access to a thermal imaging camera. So we decided to go out and thermally image the echidnas in the field to see if their nose really was cold compared to the rest of their body. And yes, it is. They keep it moist, and that nose essentially works as a wet globe and it evaporates water, which will cool the blood.
That's so fascinating. It's just another element of, I guess, that adds to the legend of the echidna, really, as being such a mysterious and wonderful mix of different characteristics. I'd imagine that particular characteristic is quite useful in possibly a warming climate.
Yes, so this means that, well, firstly, they are much more robust to higher temperatures than what we ever thought. So we found them active out and about at temperatures that were higher than what they're supposed to be lethal. And these animals were wild. They were choosing to come out and they were out and about doing their things, looking happy and healthy at temperatures that they should have been dead at. So that was fantastic to see. And this gives us another mechanism by which they can improve their heat loss. They can also do other things. So they behaviourally avoid high temperatures if they can. They can increase their general evaporative water loss. So they just increase their skin permeability to water vapour. So the cooling of the evaporation will reduce their temperature, and then the bubble blowing is another mechanism they can use.
They really have adapted well to what can be a fairly harsh and unforgiving climate, especially at the height of summer.
Yes, which is not really surprising because they have a really broad geographic distribution. So they're found in all climates all over Australia, including the deserts. So it's hard to imagine that a species that lives in these environments wouldn't have mechanisms to be able to deal with these high temperatures, because behaviour will get them so far, but there are points where you're in a hollow log and it's going to be hot. Other researchers have measured temperatures in their logs and they're over 40 degrees. So they clearly have to be able to deal with these temperatures. So our work's shown a mechanism by which they can do this.
You spoke before about how they are fairly solitary, except, of course, when it's mating season. And that's when you've noticed also that they become a little bit more vocal than the rest of the time. Are you following through with that vocalisation and how they actually communicate?
So that's something we'd really like to look into. So now that we know for certain that they do vocalise, we'd like to understand what these vocalisations actually mean, the context that they're used in, who's vocalising, to really understand more about their social interactions.
What have you seen and heard out in the field?
So we've accidentally come across these vocalisations. So the original time that we heard it, I was out in the field helping one of my PhD students and we were doing a different study on the echidnas, and we walked up to the echidna that we'd been radio tracking, and he was actually in a mating train. So there was a female and a number of other males there, and he was in that train, and we heard him vocalise then. And we were really surprised because that's the first time we'd ever heard this vocalisation. And then the same individual, a couple of weeks later, I was out with a colleague, radio tracking again, and he was on his own. And when we picked him up to change his transmitter, he vocalised again. And then we didn't hear it for a very long time, years, maybe 15 years, and the BBC was doing some work here and they had some remote cameras set up and they happened to get some echidnas vocalising on that, and we also heard another individual vocalising when we were handling it.
How would you describe the sound?
It sounds like a dove cooing is how I would describe it. Other people have described it as a purr, but to me it sounds like a cooing dove.
You mentioned something before that which it sort of highlights the lack of knowledge I have about echidnas when they get amorous. Can you describe in a little more detail what an echidna train is all about?
So if you have a female that is in breeding condition, males will compete to breed with her, and so you end up with this line of echidnas moving around. So the female will walk around and the males will sort of follow along behind in a line, and they're obviously competing to be the ones that mate. And we don't really understand who gets to mate and how this is decided, but it may be just the male that outlasts all the others or happens to be closest to the female when she decides it's time. We don't really understand how that's determined, but they certainly try and follow the female around and keep as close to her as they can.
So from your observations, you can't actually see anything specific happening. It just, when it happens, it happens.
I haven't ever observed mating myself. I've seen footage that other people have had, but no, I haven't actually seen. I've seen them walking around in their trains, but I haven't actually observed them mating.
Your studies have been quite extensive outside of the areas that you've already discussed with us, Dr. Cooper, but back in 2016, you were exploring the locomotor biomechanics of an echidna, how it moves. Can you define in more detail what that's all about and what your study revealed there?
So we were really interested in how echidnas move around because they do have some of those more reptilian features of their skeleton. So we were interested to see what that meant for their locomotion and then also look at some of the ecological consequences of them moving around. So we were able to look at things like stride rate and stride length and how they walk. But we were also interested in what that translated into in terms of the impacts they might have in their environment through how much time they were active, how much time they were digging, and what that might do to the soils in their environment.
What did you find out about their behaviour and their movement?
So they have limited locomotory ability and they can't really run fast, but you don't need to run fast if no one can eat you because they're very spiny, they have armour. So there's a trade-off between how powerful your limbs are and how quickly you can move. So if you're a digging mammal like the echidna, they have to dig for their food and they dig for defence, then they have to have really short, powerful limbs. They're not very good for running fast because if you want to run fast, you have long, thin limbs. So they've traded off speed for strength. And by doing that, they have their armour, so they can't really they have a lot of defence from predators, and then they can have those powerful limbs that allow them to dig, but that means that they don't move very quickly.
Are they vulnerable to a specific predator if they are, well armed against or well defended against most? Do they have a vulnerability still?
They're less vulnerable than a lot of our species, and that's probably why they still remain as one of the more widespread of our native mammals. But they can be vulnerable to cats and foxes and birds of prey. And I think particularly on Kangaroo Island, feral cats have been a problem for their echidna population, but they certainly have a better defence than so many of our other species.
When are they most active?
They're mostly nocturnal. They're probably one of our most diurnal species, but even then, they're mostly nocturnal, particularly in the summertime. So wintertime is when you're most likely to see them out and about through the daytime, evenings, and then through the summer, definitely at night.
We talk about feral cats and the like. What and the fact that the echidna is actually spread around the country and found in many different sort of ecologies and climates. Are they endangered at all? What is their status?
Their official conservation status is least concern, so they're one of the species that we're not particularly worried about at the moment. But there are some populations that we're more concerned about. So the Kangaroo Island population, for example, is not doing particularly well. But in most places, echidnas are doing better than so many of our other species, and that's probably because of their armoured defence. So feral predators are a real problem for so many of our species, whereas echidnas at least have some form of defence against that.
You talk about them being found in vastly different climates around the country. Do they display different characteristics at all
Yes, echidnas are really different over Australia, and we actually only recognise one single species, but there are different subspecies recognised, and they have differences in their anatomy, in their behaviour, in their physiology, so they can be really quite different. So one really good example would be the Tasmanian echidnas, which tend to have lots of fur and very few spines, compared to the West Australian echidnas, which have very little fur and lots of spines. So there are quite big regional differences between the subspecies.
And do they differ in size at all across those different climates?
The Tasmanian echidnas may be a little bit bigger. There's often what we call Bergman's rule, where mammals from colder climates tend to be larger than mammals from warmer climates because of the heat exchange, the physics of heat exchange. And echidnas, there's probably a small effect of that, but it's not spectacular.
In terms of the life cycle of an echidna, how long is it before a female will lay, right? And then how long does the female actually look after the young before the young is independent?
I will admit I'm not a reproductive biologist at all, so I don't really study reproduction a lot. But I'm not sure what age they're considered adult, but they have their young dependent for about a year, I think it is. So they can only produce a young about every second year.
What are you studying at the moment?
At the moment, we're sort of still working up some of our existing data for echidnas. So we have a lot of GPS data looking at where they're going and when, and relating that to temperature and body temperature and movement and climatic conditions. We've got some more accelerometry data looking at when they're active, and we've got data for their temperature on their backs as well, so we can look at, do they move when they get into solar radiation, those sorts of questions. And I'd really like to get out there and do some work on their social structure, so looking at what those vocalisations we recorded actually mean.
Just on that, your work here at Curtin has... I guess you've influenced many cohorts of researchers coming through. Do you have time to get out there in the field as much as you used to?
Yes, I really enjoy getting my hands dirty in the lab and in the field, so I make sure that I have time in my schedule, even if it's nights and weekends, where I actually get to run experiments myself as well. So yes, obviously we train students and we work closely with honours and masters and PhD students, but it's really important to me to also actually be out in the field and doing experiments myself as well.
Is the field of echidna research, is it fairly well populated in terms of researchers with your skill set and your experience, or are you one of only a few in the world that are dedicating, I guess, their research to this particular species?
They're probably one of our better studied mammals because they are so widely distributed and they are so accessible. So we certainly have more people having the opportunity to work on echidnas than a lot of other species, which are only found in really isolated areas. So yes, we definitely have several researchers in Australia who have worked on echidnas a lot.
So your ambition for the next few years is to get an understanding of the vocalisations. Are there other parts of the echidna life cycle or echidna research that really is crying out for a better depth of understanding?
So yeah, I'm a physiologist, so I have a bit of a preoccupation with temperature and energy and water. So what I'd really like to do is look at some of their social behaviour and interactions and relate that to temperature and food availability and body temperature. And so look at sort of that interaction between the environment, their physiology and their social interactions.
I guess what I'm also asking, Dr. Cooper, is whether or not there's a fair bit of collaboration or complementary research going on where you and your contemporaries are discussing each other's work, and are you aware of other exciting leaps forward that are being made in the field of echidna research? Yes,
so everyone in Australia is, especially in mammal research, is pretty collaborative. So, for example, a lot of the work we did, we collaborated with Stuart Nicol from University of Tasmania, who has worked on echidnas for 40-odd years. And the student that I first heard the vocalisations with, she was actually co-supervised by me, by a colleague at UWA and by Stuart in Tasmania. So we certainly do collaborate on those research projects.
What needs to happen with regards to echidna research, say over the next 20, 30 years, in your opinion, that will really round out the research required to conserve and better understand these mammals going forward?
So something that would be really interesting to look at is how plastic they are in their responses to things like climate change. So we understand that there's differences in the different subspecies with respect to physiological variables like water loss and conductance and energy use, but how variable can a particular population be? So that would be a really interesting question. So what sort of capacity do they have to acclimate to different conditions, and what capacity do they have to adapt to different conditions? That's a really difficult question to ask for a really long-lived big animal like an echidna. So that's one of the challenges. But I think that's one of the challenges for comparative physiologists in general is we tend to understand sort of the geographic patterns and differences, but what we don't understand very well is how animals can change their physiology in response to changing climate.
There's no chance that your work will run out in your lifetime, is what you're saying, Christine.
Oh, no. No, there's certainly more things to look at than we have the time and money to do.
Christine, the other thing I wanted to ask you was your hobby outside of your research actually takes you back into the field anyway. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you enjoy doing in your, and I use air quotes here, your off time?
Like most biologists, I enjoy photography, I enjoy bushwalking, I do enjoy bird watching. So I guess most biologists, they end up becoming biologists because they already have interests in those sorts of things. And so, yes, in our spare time, that's what we're doing. We're out there camping and bushwalking and taking photographs and bird watching for fun.
Have you ever managed to capture some amazing behaviour or just an incredible moment with your camera?
I'm not a particularly good photographer. I'm a very enthusiastic photographer, but no, I haven't taken amazing pictures. But I get some reasonable echidna pictures, but they're not incredible.
We're about to go into exam time. Are you, particularly with the researchers, your postdoctoral researchers coming through, are you hopeful for the future in terms of the echidna research going into the decades after your career's over?
Yes, I think there's always going to be that interest there, particularly if you work on iconic mammals. There are always going to be people who are really interested in that area. And then we're so fortunate here that we have access to all these amazing iconic animals and fantastic study sites that we can get out in the field and work on them. So we're very, very fortunate here in Australia that we have those natural systems that we can study. But that comes also with a responsibility to provide that information for their conservation as well.
Are you encouraged by the cohort that's, say, coming through now?
Yeah, it's great to see some of our students here studying units and showing an interest in these areas.
Christine, the capability of the echidna to live in all sorts of conditions all over the country means that it can survive extremes of temperature, especially at the height of summer. Now, fire is a big part of must be a big part of an echidna's life cycle. How do they cope in that extreme sort of condition?
So we did some research looking at how echidnas might use hibernation to survive extreme events like fires. So we were able to go out to our study site and put GPSs and transmitters and body temperature loggers on echidnas in an area that was going to be subject to a controlled burn and a control site that wasn't going to be burnt. And we monitored both groups before the controlled burn, and then DBCA carried out their controlled burn, and then we monitored how the animals responded to that. And we were able to show that echidnas in the burnt site use a lot more hibernation to reduce their activity after the fire. So by going down and becoming inactive and cold and sleeping a whole lot, they reduced their energy requirements. So they were able to survive in a post-fire landscape where there were less resources by using that hibernation strategy to be inactive.
What I want to know is, how about during the fire itself? What are some of their strategies to avoid, I don't know, burning up?
So there's two options. They either hunker down in a retreat and hope for the best, or they flee. And some of our animals use both strategies, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. So we actually had two animals in the same log at the same time. One animal fled, the other stayed, and the one that stayed ended up perishing in the fire. So they have to make that decision about how secure their retreat is and whether it's a better option to stay and hang in there and hope for the best or to flee. And in that situation, one of our research animals actually made the right decision and the other didn't make the right decision.
Its little digging legs were scurrying along And
we weren't there so we instrumented our animals, and we obviously weren't there during the burn. That wasn't safe. But we were able to go back afterwards and radio track the animals to find where they'd gone, and we can tell from their GPS where they were at the time of the fire.
So when you say a post-fire context, a post-fire landscape would mean obviously less food available, and that's why you're saying reducing activity requires less energy, obviously, right?
Yes. So once the area's been burnt, then there's a lot of less logs and decaying matter for the termites. The area's been burnt, so all those subsurface termites will not be there for a period of time. So if they can just stay somewhere and go into hibernation and not come out, reduce their activity, then they're reducing their food requirements, and they're also reducing their activity in an area that now is quite open and exposed. So they're reducing their vulnerability to predation as well.
Christine, you're a scientist. You've offered up a very analytical overview of the echidna. But tell me, at the very least, when you spend so much time with them in the field, does it become personal? Do you have names for some of the populations that some of the echidnas in the populations that you've been studying?
Sometimes we name them with actual names, and sometimes we use numbers or codes for naming them. So it depends who I'm working with and what their attitude is. Some researchers are very strict about you don't name your animals, and others find it easier to name them. I'm pretty flexible. I go either way with it. So really depending. So we either have, B1, B2, B3, or we actually give them names at the time. To me, it doesn't really make a lot of difference. So their number becomes their name anyway, whether you name them or not. But yeah, you certainly get to know certain individuals. You get frustrated by some and you grow to love others. And echidnas do tend to have quite different personalities. So some are very timid and shy. Some are really quite outgoing and adventurous. So even if you just find an echidna, some of them, if you stand very quietly, they'll just hunker down on the ground, dig in, and they just won't move for hours. Others totally ignore you. I've even had them climb over me when I've been laying on the ground trying to get a photo. So it really depends. They're quite different in their personality.
You've devoted much of your career to this animal. Are you still deriving the same sort of satisfaction out of them professionally? And do you? Is it still rewarding for you?
Yes, it's always fantastic to see animals in the wild. I mean, the one good thing about being a comparative physiologist is I get to work on a whole lot of different species, and echidnas are just one of those species. But they're certainly something that I really enjoy working on.
Christine, it's been fascinating. Thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to The Future Of, a podcast powered by Curtin University. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it. And if you want to hear more from experts, stay up to date by subscribing to us on your favourite podcast app. Bye for now.